All right, programming languages. Now so that's about the programming language, and that's about all about Claim Academy and what we do, and uh, what we uh, what we do in the whole 3 months of the career. So before I go into actual programming language, let me introduce you what are the three different things that we do in Claim Academy. So we have a full-time course, we have a part-time, and we have an online. Full-time course is when students spends 9 hours a day in Claim Academy learning new things for 12 weeks. There is a part-time course where you would be meeting on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 20 weeks. It's the same course, but it is divided into 20 weeks. Um, and because it's a part-time, and we do have mentor support on Saturdays. An online course is a live and a recording of what exactly the instructor is trying to teach for a full-time student. So those are the three kinds of things. Again, as I told you, we have Java, JavaScript, C Sharp, and cybersecurity courses. And if you need some more information after this call, one of our marketing people would be here with you, and they can answer your questions. Now, coming to programming languages, what is the need of this programming language? Why do people talk about this programming language? To be more precise, computer cannot understand what you are trying to talk or what you're trying to type, because computer understands things in binary language, which is zeros and ones and ones and zeros. For us as a human, we don't know what that 0 and 1 is, right? So what we would be doing is, but at the same time, the whole world is working on computers. When I say computers, either a mobile, either a iPad, all these are like semi-computers, right? Of course, cell phone has cellular connectivity to talk between people, but an iPad, all these things are pretty much devices that came after computers, and they are pretty much use the same stuff. So the whole world is running on these things. But for us to make a new application, we have to talk with the computer. But we don't have that capability to talk with the computer because it does not understand our language. Let's suppose there is a person who is from probably India, and he speaks in Hindi language, and there is another person who is from United States who speaks in English language. And if these two persons wanted to communicate, one of them have to know either Hindi or English. If nobody knows, if one person only knows English and the other person only knows Hindi, there is no way that they can communicate. Of course, they might use a little sign language, but they cannot become a really good communication at that time. So what they can use probably some signs of, hey, but it is not going to become a good communication. So there should be a language. The same way, when I am a person, a human being who wants to talk to the computer, and the computer doesn't understand what I'm trying to say, there has to be something in between which can actually give me an output from the computer, but at the same time, I have to understand that too. For that reason, to build something on the computers, we have something called as programming languages. It is like an intermediate way. It's not the actual terminology to use, but it is just to make everybody understand in layman terms. So it is like an intermediate person who is in between to talk between the computer and at the same time the human being. Now you might come to a question that, okay, are there only one way of language? No, there are multiple languages. So multiple languages. If there are multiple languages, why should I learn Java? Or why should I learn C Sharp? Why should I learn JavaScript? Can I learn anything? Yes, you can learn any other language. But to make you give a background of what Java and C Sharp is, again, can I drive a Hyundai Elantra? Can I drive a Honda Accord? Can I drive a Lamborghini? You can drive any of these things. Again, on what's your purpose? What is your budget? Can you maintain that car? On those grounds, you would pick a car, right? The same way, companies would pick a language depending upon what their budget is, what their need is. And most of the programming languages does the same thing, but at the same time, some has a little efficiency, some have, when you go for a Honda car, probably it's more expensive than a Hyundai car, because Honda car, you can rely more on that. But Hyundai car, you cannot rely more than, I would say, 150, 180,000 miles. But on 120, 130. But on a Honda, you can actually rely till 180 to 200. So that is the difference, right? So the same way, the computers, languages have different, each language has its own way of doing things, and at the same time each language has its own budget when you are trying to do so. The companies would take care of what to pick and what not to pick. But why to learn a Java? Why should I learn C Sharp? Why should I learn JavaScript? These are stable languages. These are like the basics, backbones for programming languages. Initially you might have heard about C, C++, and then came the Java. So C, C++ were already gone. Now not a lot of people are using non-object oriented programming. In the object oriented programming, the backbones remains as C, C Sharp, and Java. And JavaScript is also a backbone now, because there are a lot of frameworks that JavaScript can do. So that is the reason to go and learn something which is more stable and which can give you a concrete step on your career. Again, so if I go for a Java and if I learn Java, can I only become a Java developer? Yes and no, which means you can become a Java developer for sure, but at the same time, if you want to become a C# developer learning Java, it is the same terminology. It is the same concepts. And because the concept still remains the same, the language changes. It's like trying to make, let's suppose there is a toddler in our home and he doesn't know anything, obviously. And we'll try to train him on English. Probably for first 6 to 7 years, it will take time for him to understand English. But for somebody who is grown up, let's suppose if I give a book and the only work that they have is to learn Hindi in 30 days, and it is having a translation from English to Hindi, then probably in 30 days, you might not become an expert in Hindi, but at least you can understand and learn and you can talk in Hindi. The same way, once you learn one language, it is easy to understand another language because it is the same terminology. It is the same concepts that would help us. So now that is what, oh, I should have gone here instead of talking. No, just kidding. So Java is one of the most popular and widely used programming languages. Again, it's fast, reliable, and secure. And we can have from desktop to web applications, everything can be done on a Java. So it's not platform independent. It is any platform, we can build any application on Java. And about Java, it's again, it's platform independent language, which means you can work on anywhere else. And it is object oriented. Object oriented means you are trying to divide the big chunks into smaller, and then you are actually using that smaller chunks. That is like the layman terms, but if you try to think about something like a luxury car is a class, and then you have an object which is called BMW, which is called Audi, which means there is a certain principles for being in a luxury car, and the object that we are trying to talk is a BMW or an Audi. So in Java, we have objects. Everything that we work on is an object. And because it is an object-oriented programming language, it is easy for you to communicate between the objects. So that is about the Java. There are two things. One is JDK and JRE. JDK is Java Development Kit, which is a software development environment that you will be using to develop the application. And then there is a JRE. JRE is the interpreter, the one that actually has the tools that you need for the development of Java. So to make your computer run Java or to work on Java, you have to have this JDK and JRE, Java Development Kit, and at the same time, Java Runtime Environment. Okay, if you have both of these, Then you need something called as a tool. So you will be downloading Java into your computer, and once you download your Java, you need a tool. The um, tool is like Eclipse, Intelligent JE. These are the tools that you can use. Again, tool might be differed from one company to another company. Here in Claim Academy, we use Eclipse. Eclipse is like, because it's stable and it's easy to learn, we use Eclipse. But that's just a tool. It's like, should I use Notepad++ or a Sublime text for text editor? It's up to you. But the purpose still remains the same. Do you want to use a Lightroom or a Photoshop? Lightroom and Photoshop serves the same purpose, which is trying to make the photos look good, make it editing of the photos, right? So you can use any of the tool. The same way we use, once we download JDK and JRE into your computer, we will be using an Eclipse, which is an IDE. IDE is the one that it's like a tool. I will not go into like the specifics on it, but let's keep it to be a tool for now. And then, so what can I build? What can I build with Java? Again, as I told you, you can build pretty much everything with Java. But to be more specific, and what you would be, again, these are only a few things that you would be learning in Claim Academy. But it is not that these are the only things that the Java would be building on. But you can build web applications. You can build Windows applications. You can build web services. You can build console applications. Let me give you a quick understanding what a Windows application is, web application is, web service is, and a console application is. So a website, again, there is a difference between, we are not talking about websites. We're talking about web applications. Web applications are one thing that can have interaction going on. Websites are more static and they do not do much of things. All the things are already fixed on that website and you cannot have an interaction. But if you go to Facebook, you are actually interacting. Who are you trying to interact with? You are trying to interact with either your own data or data with somebody else. You use an Uber. Uber is not like a static page which shows you a menu, but there are things that are running, right? So if things are running in it and you are able to interact with it, then it is called an application. So a Windows application, when I say Windows application, Notepad is a Windows application where you need to download it and try to run it on the computer to actually work on it. Whereas there is web applications. Facebook is an application, but it can be run only in web. If there is no internet, you cannot work on web application. Again, you might ask me, can I not just use Safari or can I not just use Chrome? Yes, you can. But it is still an application that is running on the web. You can download a Facebook app on your computer or on your phone, and then you can use it. At that time, it still doesn't become a web application, even though you are installing it, because you are trying to have a connectivity. For something like Photoshop, you don't need an internet connectivity. But for a Facebook, you still need an internet connectivity. So if there is an application that runs on the internet, then it is called a web application. If there is a application that you would bring it from the internet and keep it on your local machine, it becomes a Windows application. Then there is something called as console application. I will go over web service in a quick minute, but console applications. Console applications are, if you remember, like 10 years ago, where we used to use computers, it's all black screens and you would just give some kind of a command and then it would give you an output. Console application is exactly the same thing. It's you try to give some command, it will give you an output. But whereas web application is more advanced than a console application, because it doesn't look odd, I would say, with that black screen, and you're not just giving commands, you can actually run around with whatever things that you wanted to do. But why do we need to learn console applications? First thing is you need to learn how to walk first, only then you can run. So the same thing. First thing that you need to do is you will learn something on a console application, and then you would learn something on a web application. Now then there is something called as web service. What is a web service? A web service is, let's suppose there is an application that you are trying to use. Like, let's suppose, what should I take? Okay, Facebook. In Facebook, you can have check-ins and you have a map that shows where you are. Let's go for Airbnb. On the Airbnb, you'll have a map and you will find out where those exact houses are, right? Just for the sake of Airbnb, there is not Airbnb did not create a new map for itself. It probably is using a map from Google or Bing or any other service. Okay, so for an application, let's suppose you are trying to build a small application for maybe a restaurant or maybe a chain of saloons or stuff like that. You cannot build your own map, but you would be using the map. So basically, Google provides that, and Google is providing that service, and you are trying to use them. The same way, a real-time data that you wanted to bring in from some Walmart API or Walmart web service, or probably from Sky Scanner to get the what we call flight details. So all these are web applications when they are on their grounds, but when we are trying to use it from them to us, then it becomes a web service. So you can build web services and you can also consume web services. Okay, IDE. I stopped at that IDE previously. IDE is integrated development environment. This is nothing but a tool where we will be actually writing our code. And again, as I told you, we will be using Eclipse, but there is an IDE like IntelliJ and NetBeans also, but it's up to you what you would be using. Now, this is an IDE that Eclipse that I'm talking about. This is how it looks. This is how it looks. And if you see here, you have a lot of options where, again, this is an image that I've captured. But if you see, there are all these folders that has classes or that has what we call programs in it. And you can keep it like a folder structure. These are called packages. So let me try to show you what that package is. Package is the biggest what we call folder structure. In a package, you will have something called as a class. In the class, you will have something called as a main method. Main method is the starting of a program. When there is a starting of the program, what happens is, again, if you want your program to run, you need to have a starting of the program, right? So the main method serves as the starting of your program. Now, what is a class? Class, again, if you go into too much technical terms, class is nothing but a blueprint and all those things. But for now, let's keep it to have where the main method is working. If you have a main method or any method to work, you need to have that inside a class. Does that make sense? And now, okay, that is what a class is, that is what a main method is. Now, let's suppose we have statements. In programming languages, whatever we write is not a sentence. In English, we write something called as statement, but in programming language, we use something called as statements. In English, we write sentences. In programming languages, we write statements. A statement always ends with a semicolon. So let me suppose if you wanted to print or show an output on Java, which is welcome to Java. So what you will be doing is you will use something called as system.out.println. In brackets, you will have this parenthesis, and in the parenthesis, you will write whatever you need to do. So only this part from W to the exclamatory mark, these things would be displayed to you on the screen. So what is happening here is, it is just asking the system to say, hey system, please print a line outside of this place, which is hello, welcome to Java. So, and every statement have to end with a semicolon. So whenever you are trying to write, again, you probably might be like, this is something really new. Of course, it's completely new because this is a new language. When you are trying to learn a new language, a language has its own anatomy. And comments. So comments are not like statements, but comments are more for our documentation purpose, which means when you are trying to write a comment, you, even if you write something with comments, if you write something with comments, we will need semicolons when we have those what we call, not the semicolons, what do we call this, backslashes. When we have these backslashes, what we have is, what happens is, the computer will not the computer will not, or the Java will not work. It will be something like the Java will, it's not, it doesn't work. It is something like where it would not run for that specific lines. It is only for the sake of notes. It is only for the sake of documentation purpose. So why do we write this? Again, for the sake of documentation purpose, and also to make sure our life is more easier, because your code that you have written down, probably somebody else might be using it. You might understand what you're trying to write, but somebody else might not understand because it is all logic. So when that is happening, for another person to make sure they understand what they are trying to do, we use comments. Then comes variables. Variables is where you actually store a value. Variable is actually where you are trying to place something inside a program. So it's nothing like a container. It's nothing but like a container. In the container, you are trying to store a value. Let's suppose it's like, right now before my desk, I have a bag of tea bags. Will I have coffee bags inside that tea bag? No, it would not, which means that there is only tea bags that needs to go inside that. So variable, even though this is a container, is that a container? Yes, it is a container. But if it has coffee in it, then it becomes a coffee bag. I don't know whether there's a coffee bag in real world or not. But then there is something called as tea bag. In that tea bag, only things which are supposed to go with tea would go inside. So the same way, even though it's a bag, it will only take the things that similar things would go inside. So if you are trying to do something called as a variable, and then if you say it needs to hold only numbers, then if it says it needs to hold only numbers, then it will hold only numbers. If you say that it is going to hold only letters, then it will hold only letters. So how do you make that happen? So you can create a variable, assign a value, and then you use them throughout your program. How you would do it? Before going to the data types, this is how it looks. So I created a container which is called as count. And in the count, I am trying to store the value which is 100. In the count, I am trying to store the value which is called 100. But when I am trying to create this, first thing I have to tell what is the type of the container count is. The type of the container count is an integer, which means it can only take integer values inside it. So if it only take integers values, it cannot take any other values, which means you cannot have a decimal value inside it. You cannot have a character inside it. For every purpose, there is a different data type. This is called a data type, the type of which it would be going. This is just a name. I can have Claim Academy here, that's fine. I can have anybody else's name, that is fine. But this would change depending upon what your data is. This would change depending upon your name, whatever you wanted to name that. And again, the value, whatever you want to store. So let me go back to this one. Data types. So in data types, there are two kinds of data types. One is primitive data type and non-primitive data type. So what is primitive data type? These are, for now, let's think about it as already fixed values. Okay. So in primitive, There are all these values. Boolean, if you wanted to store true or false, you would be using a data type called Boolean. If you want to store a numeric, then the numeric, the number can be divided into multiple things, or the numeric can be divided into multiple things. One is a character and one is an integral. So in the integral, there is integers. This is where the integer stands in, which is like the number. Short is a little more less space than integer. Long is more space. I think it's 32-bit space, which can hold up to like 32 numbers in a single value. Whereas floating, double and float can hold small decimal points, double can hold big decimal points. To be more precise, again, they have their own data, what we call, they have their own specific datas that they would be using, but they have specific data like 32-bit or 42-bit and what size it is, but it's self-explanatory. So now my integer falls into a primitive data type. When another thing is, there is something called as non-primitive data type, which means it is not pre-made. It could be made by the user. Okay. So an array, a string is nothing but a place where you can have multiple characters. For character, this is the keyword. For string, you have multiple characters. So which means a character is like one letter, which is like A, which is B, which is C. But you cannot store A, B, C, combination of A, B, C, or a word like claim inside the character. You can only store C from the claim. But whereas in string, you can store combination of characters. So we are trying to of course, the string is already named, it's under the anatomy of programming languages. But at the same time, we are trying to combine those characters. So those are called non-primitive data types. It might be a little overwhelming at this very first point, in the very first session. But at the same time, for now, just remember it like this. If you wanted to store true and false, you will use Boolean. If you want to store character values, which is all the keyboard values inside it, you will use something like this. If you want to use a smaller value, which is numbers, then you use byte. A little bigger value is short. A sensible value like 10, 20, 40, 50, 60, integer. If it has big numbers, then use long. Floating point, always it's small decimal points. These are big decimal points. For now, let's just think about like that. And I already went through these variables on how those variables would be. And now, if you write a sample code, the sample code looks something like this. What we did is, here we said int count equals 100. Whereas here, what I'm trying to write is integer A is 10, which means a container which holds integers and the name of the container is A is holding the value 10. So, which means that, okay, I have a space and all I'm trying to do is that space can only accommodate integers. And the only thing that I'm trying to do right now is, okay, I am accommodating it. So the name of it is A. Now I wanted to do a calculation, A plus B. Or 10 plus 20. So I stored the value of 10 in A, I stored the value of B in 20. When I'm trying to store the value of A in A and B, I want an output which is 10 plus 20 is 30. But at the same time, to store that 30, I still need a space. For that, again, I need to have a container. So always remember that anything that you wanted to store, anything that you wanted to keep, it needs a container. Container is nothing but a variable. A variable, why do we call variable a variable? Why did they name them like it? Because variable can be changed. Now, if you see integer C is empty right now, which means it has a null value, it has a 0 value in it. Now, what I'm trying to do is C is equal to A plus B, which means I'm adding the value of A. I'm not adding A, I'm adding the value of A and value of B, which means the value inside A is 10 and the value inside B is 20. So when I'm adding these two things are added and then they are stored inside C. And you might ask me a question, oh, does all these regular mathematical things work? Yes, it works. Computer is really smart. You don't have to teach it mathematics. Only thing that you have to teach is logic on how to do it. So now it says C equal to A plus B, and then I say system dot out dot println C, which means that if you remember in our previous slide, we said system dot out dot println is to print a value. So now what is the value that I'm trying to print? The value that I'm trying to print is value C, which is 30. So if I'm trying to print the value C, which is 30, it will display me on my console space, which is my output screen. On the output screen, you see a 30 would be displayed. So again, this is just to explain you all that code. If you cannot see that, A, B, C. There is another way you can write int C equal to A plus B. That is just trying to cut short of this one, this whole sentence. And then all the arithmetic operators, like arithmetic operators, addition, multiplication, subtraction, incrementing. So incrementing is like if you have 10 on A plus plus becomes 11. If you have 10 on A, then A minus minus becomes 9. So, and keeps on going like this, okay? And now that we have already know what the variable would be, and we already have a sample code, I want you guys to look at this code or this exercise and try to write this exercise. You don't need a compiler right now. You don't need, I know that it's a 1 hour session, and just downloading that Eclipse and Java takes probably like 30-35 minutes. So we didn't do that part, but you can write this on a pen and paper. And once you write it on a pen and paper, you would see that, okay, this is how it works. But again, on a pen and paper might not be ideal because you don't know whether it is actually giving you the right answer or not. So if you want to learn about how to build applications like this, now that it made, of course, we are doing a simplest problem of adding two values. And now all I'm trying to do is printing out this thing. So this is nothing but how you build your logic. Once you build your logic, it keeps on increasing and increasing. But once you know how to write it and how to store it in containers, then all you need to learn is the language. The language, again, I think I don't understand this language right now. If you think about something like that, yes, no, it's a new language, so it takes a learning curve. And if you are doing it every single day, then you eventually become a developer. That's it. It's more practice. And I think that would end the session. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to our marketing people who will be on this call after the session is done. And if you have any questions going further, you can go ahead and reach out for them. And at the same time, before I leave, if you think this is something that you liked, and if you think that, hey, I want to give it a shot, what we do in Claim Academy is, as I told you, again, we make you become software developers, but at the same time, we do have a pre-course work. The pre-course work is for free. And what you would be doing is, if you reach out to any of our staff, they are going to provide you the free pre-course work. And just as how I taught you variables, there would be another instructor, a recorded video of an instructor trying to teach you a little more Java, basics of Java. And then there are certain questions that you need to answer. Once you answer those questions, you probably would feel a little more confident on, okay, I can probably take this as a career. So I would say utilize that free source that Claim Academy is providing, and you can directly start learning by yourself. And if you feel that, okay, this is really interesting and I wanted to learn more, once you finish off that pre-course work, all we expect from Claim Academy is that you send the code that you have written down. It's not just videos that will teach you, but at the same time, there are some questions in between. So those questions, please make sure that you write it down on your Eclipse and then send it to Claim Academy so that we can validate and we can let you know that, hey, you actually did it right or wrong, and then we can go for the next process. Hopefully this session helped you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Claim Academy. And yep, thank you so much. Have a good